Why hasn't the quarterly report been uploaded to the executive dashboard? It was due an hour ago. Who didn't do their job? His voice rang out, sharp and commanding. The polished calm of the Crestwood Hotel lobby shattered like glass. Conversations halted mid-word. Fingers froze over tablet screens. Even the bellhop pushing a luggage cart came to a full stop. Samuel Graves turned slowly. At 35, he was the kind of man few dared to oppose. Tall, sharply dressed in a black tailored suit and open collar, he carried authority effortlessly. His cold, calculating eyes scanned the lobby until they locked onto Hertha, a young woman behind the cashier desk. She stood there with quiet strength, hands folded in front of her. Her blonde hair was neatly tied in a ponytail. Her uniform was crisp, her name badge red. Chloe. She'd only been working there for 3 weeks, yet here she was speaking as if she had every right to. "Do you think disrespect earns you a place here?" Samuel asked, voice low and deliberate. "I think fear only leads to silence," she replied. "And silence never leads to growth." The air thickened. The other staff watched from behind the concierge desk, frozen, waiting for the eruption that always followed. Only minutes earlier, Samuel had stormed into the lobby like a storm cloud rolling in. The moment the glass doors opened, the energy shifted. His eyes swept the room, noting everything from the lighting to how Henry, the senior concierge, adjusted his tie, walked to the center of the space, pulled out his phone, and checked. The executive dashboard, still nothing. That's when he snapped. "Why isn't the quarterly report uploaded?" he barked, his voice echoing against the marble walls. "What? It was due an hour ago. Who's responsible?" Henry stepped forward, flustered and fidgeting with a tablet. "I believe there was a syncing issue with the system, sir. I've already contacted it," Samuel cut in, icy and sharp. "Syncing issue? It sounds like an excuse, not a solution. This isn't some roadside motel scrambling to keep the lights on. This is Crestwood. If you can't keep up, maybe you're not fit for the role." Henry's face turned red. His gaze dropped to the floor. The weight of humiliation pressed into every crease of his suit. And then Chloe spoke, now face to face with her. Samuel said nothing, his expression unreadable, his posture rigid. Chloe knew she was risking her job. But something inside her couldn't stay silent. Not after seeing someone like Henry publicly shamed. It's not after everything she'd endured in her life. She wasn't going to be just another employee who stayed quiet out of fear. "I understand the importance of accountability," she added, her voice calm but unwavering. "But accountability shouldn't feel like humiliation." Samuel blinked. Once in his world, people didn't talk back, they apologized, lowered their heads. They moved aside. But this new girl and known unimportant on paper had just challenged him. And he had no quick comeback. Chloe held his gaze a moment longer, then quietly turned and walked back behind the cashier desk. Her footsteps echoed on the marble floor. She didn't look back. Silence lingered in the lobby. Samuel didn't move. The elevator behind him chimed and opened. But he remained rooted in place. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't furious, he was intrigued. Disarmed staff cautiously resumed their work, stealing glances his way. But he stayed silent, eyes fixed on where Chloe had stood.
Our words
Still ringing in his ears. And somewhere,
that
in the quiet corner of his soul he rarely allowed himself to visit, something shifted. Samuel Graves hadn't always been the man people feared. Before the tailored suits and the cold stares, there was a time he believed in people. In laughter. In trust. In his 20s, Samuel was a dreamer. He launched his first boutique hotel startup with his best friend, Colin. They poured their hearts into it late nights, shared visions, big hopes. He even brought his girlfriend Claire into their circle. Back then, life felt full. But at 28, everything crumbled. Colin disappeared, along with millions in investor money. Claire vanished, to ride alongside him. Samuel was left with lawsuits, debts, betrayal. A week later, his mother, his last living family, passed away from sudden heart failure. Something inside him broke. From that moment on, Samuel built his Empire, not on trust, but on vengeance. He rebuilt alone. Hardened, he told himself. Never trust anyone. Everyone leaves. By 35, he was a multimillionaire. The Crestwood hotel chain was sleek, elite, and ruled by fear. The board respected him. The staff feared him, but no one really knew him, except every Sunday, like clockwork, Samuel shed the suits, slipped into jeans and a hoodie, and drove across town to St. Agnes's Children's Home. The kids there called him Mr. Sam. He brought pizza, played guitar, repaired broken toys. He listened. 2 stories of absent parents and tough days. There were no cameras, no articles. Just quiet moments where he could feel human again. Chloe Hart knew what injustice looked like. Her mother, Maria, had worked as a hotel room attendant for over 20 years. Kind, tireless, dignified. But one rainy afternoon, a rude guest falsely accused her of spilling coffee on his designer shoes. She was fired on the spot. Chloe was 17. She came home to find her mother crying silently on the kitchen floor. Justice is for people with power, her mother whispered, not people like us. That moment etched itself into Chloe's bones. Later in college, she met a man who seemed kind, supportive. He promised the world, until he drained her savings and vanished. Chloe dropped out, took 2 jobs to survive. Working at Crestwood was supposed to be a temporary job, a stepping stone. But from her first day, Chloe noticed things most people chose to ignore. The stiff shoulders when the CEO entered the room, the way older employees avoided eye contact, the forced smiles that vanished the moment Samuel Graves appeared. Still, she showed up. She ached hard. She smiled, and she paid attention. Then one morning, she watched him tear into an elderly concierge over a minor scheduling error. The man's hands shook. No one said a word, but something in Chloe lit up. Something forged in fire, the fire of watching her own mother cry quietly on their kitchen floor years ago. So she spoke, not to be brave, not to rebel, but because to her silence felt like betrayal. And people like Chloe, they're not shaped by ease, they're forged in pain. And pain, when turned into purpose, becomes power. Midweek, a staffing shortage hit. Chloe was reassigned from the quiet guest services corner to the front desk, right in the center of the lobby. The hotel's heart buzzing with guests, noise, and non-stop pressure. It also happened to be the one place Samuel Graves walked through several times a day. From the moment she stood behind that new desk, she felt the shift. Conversations were clipped, smiles strained. Everyone moved a little faster, a little quieter, as if trying not to be noticed. But Chloe held her own. She greeted guests warmly, gave directions with ease, and kept her tone polite, yet genuine. On her 3rd day in the new post, everything changed. Samuel appeared out of nowhere, fresh from a meeting, to executives in tow. As he passed by, Chloe was helping a guest. "And if there's anything else you need during your stay," she said, finishing with a professional smile, "please don't hesitate to let us know." Samuel stopped, mid-stride. He turned. His voice was dipped in condescension. "If that's the voice you used during your interview," said, "it explains how I made the mistake of hiring you." Chloe froze. Heat rose up her neck. The guest looked away. A junior concierge ducked behind the counter. No one moved, but Chloe inhaled, turned, and replied, steady and clear, "And I'm starting to understand why no one here dares to smile." Her words landed harder than even she expected. Samuel blinked. A flicker of something surprise flashed across his face, but vanished as quickly as it came. He said nothing, turned, and walked away. The 2 executives hurrying behind him. The lobby held its breath. Then slowly, the hum of daily routine crept back. Chloe sat down, hands trembling under the counter. She knew she'd crossed a line, but she didn't regret it. She wasn't afraid of Samuel Graves, at least. That's what she told herself. Later that week, the tension between them still hung heavy, but neither acknowledged it. He passed her desk more often now. Sometimes he glanced her way, sometimes not. She never greeted him, never said a word. Then came that afternoon. Chloe stepped outside for a break, needing fresh air after a long shift filled with complaints and check-ins. As she turned the corner by the valet loop, she saw a small commotion. An elderly man in a wheelchair had tipped sideways on a cracked sidewalk. His groceries cans, fruit, a loaf of bread scattered everywhere. People stood nearby, unsure, hesitating. Chloe rushed forward, but someone was already there. Samuel, he was crouched beside the man. One arm steadying his shoulder, the other gathering the fallen items. His suit jacket had slipped off in the process. He said something soft Chloe couldn't hear. But his expression, patient, gentle, stopped her in her tracks. The elderly man patted his arm, murmuring thanks. And that's when Samuel looked up and saw her. For a long second, they just stared. KHLOE, frozen mid-step. Samuel, still kneeling by the wheelchair. Then he stood, adjusted his sleeves, and walked away. No explanation, no words, just gone. But something lingered. Chloe remained there, standing in the breeze, her thoughts tangled. The man she'd labeled cold, cruel machine in a tailored suit had just revealed something else, something buried deep, and for the first time, she wondered if she'd only seen one side of him. The afternoon sun stretched. Long shadows across the entrance of the Crestwood Hotel. The street bustled. Guests arrived. Valets rushed. Delivery trucks backed into loading zones. Chloe stepped out the side door, arms full of paper bags from the cafe across the street, special orders for a VIP suite. She had volunteered to grab them herself. She didn't trust the chaotic lunch. Rushed, her phone buzzed. A message from her mom. At the same time, the crosswalk light blinked white. She stepped into the street. Without looking, she didn't see the black car speeding around the corner, tires screeching slightly as it tried to make the green light. But someone else did. Chloe. She barely heard her name before a body slammed into hers, strong arms wrapping around her waist. Pulling her out of the car's path just in time, the force knocked them both to the ground. Bags flew, groceries scattered. She gasped, breath stolen from her lungs, heart hammering in her chest. When she opened her eyes, she was pressed against a solid chest, someone's heartbeat racing beneath her cheek. Samuel, his arms were tight around her, protective, unmoving. His breath came in sharp, ragged bursts against her hair. His grip wasn't forceful, it was desperate. Not a man claiming power. A man who'd just feared the worst. Neither of them moved. Everything else, the horns, the shouting driver, the rustling trees faded away. All that existed was this one moment. Chloe slowly looked up. Their eyes met. And his weren't cold. They were wide, shaken. Human, his hand still rested gently on her back, as if making sure she was real. "You," he began, his voice raw, barely a whisper. "Are you okay?" It was the first time she'd ever heard him sound. Like that, not polished, not powerful, vulnerable, afraid. She nodded, voice caught in her throat. "Yeah, I think so." He blinked slowly and let her go. His hands lingered for half a second longer before dropping to his sides. Chloe stepped back. She stepped back, breath shallow. Her hands trembled slightly, and she clasped them together to hide it. "Thank you," she said softly. Samuel nodded. "You weren't watching." "I was distracted." He opened his mouth as if to scold. Her then stopped. His jaw tightened. He looked away. "I saw the car," he said quietly. There wasn't time to think. She nodded again, not sure what else to say. The moment lingered. Then Chloe bent down, quietly collecting the crushed paper bags that had burst open in the fall. Samuel knelt beside her without a word, helping pick up the spilled pastries and coffee cups. When their hands brushed over a fallen croissant, she quickly pulled hers away. Samuel paused, holding it a second before handing it to her with an unreadable expression. They stood in silence. Chloe turned toward the hotel. "I should get this to the suite." Samuel nodded. "Be careful next time." There was no edge in his voice, just concern. She walked back inside. Her heart still raced. She didn't know if it was from the near-accident tour, the way he had held her. The lobby swallowed her, it back into its rhythm, familiar, structured, routine, but nothing felt routine anymore. That night, Chloe lay awake, staring at the ceiling of her tiny apartment. The room was silent, but her mind kept replaying everything. The blur of movement, the strength of his arms. The sound of his heartbeat pressed against her, his voice soft, shaken. "Are you okay?" She turned onto her side, clutching her pillow tightly. She'd already seen glimpses of a different Samuelda. One who knelt to help an elderly man in a wheelchair. The one who didn't ask for credit. But this had been something else entirely, and for the first time since starting at Crestwood, Chloe realized she wasn't sure who Samuel Graves really was. The sky was overcast that Saturday, soft gray that made the world feel quieter. Chloe stood across the street, hands in her coat pockets, watching Samuel stepped out of his black car, not in a suit, but in jeans, sneakers, and a faded hoodie. Looked ... normal. More than that, he looked out of place. Like he'd taken off the armor he always wore. She followed at a distance as he passed through the rusted gates of a small building tucked between apartment blocks. There was no sign, but she recognized it immediately. St. Agnes's Children's Home. She'd donated books there once, after college. She remembered the peeling paint, the wilted flower beds still cared for, despite everything. The place never had much, but it had heart. The door opened before Samuel even knocked. A little girl with pigtails ran out and launched herself at him. "Uncle E." She skewed. More children followed, pouring out like sunlight after rain. "Uncle E, you came." Samuel laughed an easy, joyful sound Chloe had never heard from him before. He knelt with open arms, wrapping them in a hug. One boy climbed onto his back, another tugged his sleeve. "Did you bring the guitar?" someone asked. He held up a worn black case and winked. Would I ever forget? The kids cheered and pulled him inside. Chloe stepped closer, stopping just under one of the windows. She stayed behind the cracked wooden frame, careful not to be seen. Inside, the room was small, but cozy. A rug covered the floor. Children's drawings lined the walls. Fluttering slightly under the breeze from a fan, Samuel sat on a faded sofa, tuning the guitar like he'd done it 1,000 times. The kids gathered around, some cross-legged, others leaning against him. He began strumming a silly made-up song about a giraffe who wanted to be a chef. The children giggled, clapped, and sang along. Chloe stood frozen, a lump rising in her throat. This wasn't the man who barked orders. In luxury lobbies, not the man who silenced staff with a glance. This was someone else entirely. Someone who laughed. Someone who gave. Someone real. She stayed 10 more minutes, heart aching in a way she couldn't quite explain. Then she turned and walked away before he could see her. The next morning, just after the breakfast rush, Chloe was wiping down the front desk when her phone buzzed. Unknown number, coffee. 5 p.m. There's something I think we should talk about. Her heart skipped. He didn't need to ask who it was. At exactly 5, they met at a quiet cafe 2 blocks from the hotel. Samuel was already there, sitting outside, 2 cups in front of him. No security, no staff. Just him. "You followed me yesterday," he said. Not accusing, just calm, curious. Chloe's eyes widened. Yes. "I did, I figured," he said, sipping his coffee. No one looks that shocked over a croissant unless they saw something. They weren't meant to. She smiled, a little embarrassed. "I wasn't spying, I just needed to understand." He nodded and looked away. "They call me Uncle E," he said quietly. "Started going there after a board meeting went sideways. I needed to remember what kindness looked like." She didn't say anything. Just let the silence hang. He turned back to her. His voice lowered. "I built walls, Chloe. Thick ones, steel, reinforced. Most people think it's pride or power. But the truth is," his eyes met hers, "sometimes we wear armor not to be strong, but to survive." His words hung in the air like fog. Chloe blinked, her breath catching. She'd expected sarcasm. Maybe a joke, anything to avoid vulnerability. Instead, He offered her truth, and it broke something inside her wide open, because she understood that kind of survival. She had lived it. Her voice trembled slightly. I know what that's like. He smiled softly. The first real smile she'd ever seen from him. No ego, no defense. Just a man letting himself be seen. They stayed like that for a long time. No roles, no rank, just a people with scar tissue, finally letting in a little light. The whispers started small. A glance in the hallway, some murmur in the break room. But by the end of the week, they were everywhere. Guess being a cashier isn't such a dead end after all. Nice perk CEO coffee delivery. It was Amy who said it loudest, voice sharp. Enough to cut glass, just as Chloe passed by. Looks like someone found a shortcut to heaven. CEO perks, extra boba and all. Laughter followed, cold, cruel. Chloe froze. Her face went pale. But it wasn't embarrassment that gutted her. It was something worse. He had to know. And yet, said nothing. The glances, the quiet shift in her coworkers' smiles, the polite avoidance. And Samuel, who used to linger near her desk, who once found any excuse to ask if she'd eaten, had gone silent. No texts, no calls, no coffee, nothing. That night, Chloe stood outside his office. Her heart raced. The hotel was quiet, the hallway still. She knocked. Come in, Samuel called. Not. Looking up, he sat behind his desk, lamplight soft across his face. When he finally looked at her, something flickered in his eyes, but vanished fast. No warmth, just waiting. Do you know what they're saying about me? She asked, stepping into the room. He closed the folder in front of him. Slowly, I've heard rumors. Rumors, she repeated. You mean the assumption that I'm sleeping my way up? That I'm just some charity case you're entertaining between meetings? His jaw clenched. Her voice cracked, but she kept going. And you let it happen. You let them believe it. I don't owe anyone an explanation, he said, quiet but firm, especially for something that isn't true. No, she said, her voice rising. You owe it to me. Stood but didn't move toward her. I didn't want to make it worse. By staying silent? That is what made it worse. I didn't know how to fix it, he said. I didn't know how to not ruin what we had. She looked at him, eyes shimmering. You already did. He swallowed hard. His hands curled at his sides. I never wanted to hurt you. But you did, she said, voice barely a whisper. And the worst part? You didn't even try to stop it. Samuel said nothing. He wanted to tell her he hadn't slept in days. That he'd rehearsed every apology over and over. Someone close had always ended in heartbreak, but the words stayed buried. Chloe stepped forward, pulled a small key from her pocket, and set it on his desk. I'm taking a week off. I need to figure out if I was wrong to trust you. She turned toward the door. Samuel took half a step forward, then froze. Chloe, he said. She paused, hand on the doorknob, turned back to look at him one last time. He was still standing. There, still hadn't moved, still hadn't said what mattered most. His lips parted, as if he was about to say something, anything. But the silence said more than words ever could. Chloe's chest tightened, but she gave him a small nod and quietly walked away. The door clicked shut behind her. Samuel didn't move. For several long seconds he just stood there. Then slowly he sat down, elbows on his desk, head in his hands. When he finally looked up, his eyes were dark, impossible to read. He reached for the key she'd returned. It was still warm from her hand. He clenched it in his fist so tightly the metal dug into his skin. Across from him, the chair Chloe always sat in was empty, and suddenly the entire room felt hollow. Chloe's thoughts. I used to believe that if you were honest and cared deeply enough, you'd never be left behind. But I was wrong. Silence isn't mercy, it's abandonment in disguise. The hotel felt quieter, not because it was less busy. Guests still arrived, emails still pinged. But something was missing. Chloe had been gone for 6 days. Samuel felt it in every glance at the front desk, in the space where her smile used to be. This time, he didn't retreat. He acted at the beginning of the week. He called for a full staff meeting. The room filled quickly, buzzing with whispers and curiosity. Samuel stood at the front. Black suit as usual, but something in his posture had changed. There was a stillness, a fire behind his eyes. If anyone here thinks success is about charm, manipulation, or standing close to power, he began, then maybe you need to rethink what integrity really means. Amy flinched slightly in her seat. I built this company on structure and discipline, Samuel continued, but I let fear speak louder than fairness. I stayed silent when I should have spoken. He paused, then softer. I owe someone an apology, not in private here, where the damage happened. His voice lowered, but his words carried weight. I let someone walk away thinking I didn't see her or value her, and I was wrong. The room was silent. She's not here, he finished. But I hope she hears me. And with that, he walked away, leaving the room breathless. The next night, the hotel hosted a charity gala for St. Agnes's Children's Home, a place Samuel had quietly supported for years. Chloe received the invitation in a plain, unmarked envelope. She wasn't sure if she should go, but something inside her whispered, go. She arrived quietly. Staying in the back, the MC stepped up and announced the scheduled speaker had fallen ill. The crowd murmured. Then Samuel walked on stage. No suit. Just a white shirt, sleeves rolled, and an old black guitar in hand. I'm not a speaker, he said, and I'm definitely not a performer. But I've learned that sometimes silence does more harm than truth ever could. He glanced across the room. His eyes paused briefly in Chloe. I used to think hiding who I really was kept me safe. But someone taught me that silence, especially when it matters most, is its own kind of betrayal. He sat, adjusted the guitar, and began to play. Started soft, a playful song the children loved. His voice, rich and genuine, filled the ballroom. Midway through, a little boy ran up to the stage. Uncle E. He shouted, hugging Samuel. Tight? Samuel smiled. Missed you too, buddy. In the back, Chloe felt her throat tighten. Her eyes stung. He had seen her. Then Samuel stood, mic in hand. There's someone here who means more to me than she probably knows, he said. I hurt her by saying nothing when I should have stood beside her. I thought silence would protect us. But I was wrong. He turned to her, eyes open and guarded. She's here. Tonight, in front of all of you, I want her to know. Not afraid to be seen with her. I'm not afraid to reach for her hand. A hush swept over the room. Chloe stepped forward. Every step felt heavy and right. Samuel extended his hand. She paused, then slowly placed hers in his. Her smile broke. Through the tears, the crowd erupted into applause, but they only saw each other. No more rumors. No more silence.
Wow, just truth.
In the beginning, change didn't happen overnight, but it began. It started with an email titled, Listening Fridays, every Friday afternoon. Any employee from janitor to junior manager could book a 15-minute no-filter chat with an executive. The bottom of the email was one name, Samuel Graves. Some scoffed. Others rolled their eyes. But that Friday, Samuel showed up. He listened to a night shift bellhop describe his exhaustion. He took notes, while a housekeeper explained her struggles to care for her child. He didn't interrupt, didn't justify. He just listened, and something began to shift. The next week, more signed up. By month's end, people no longer looked away when he walked by. They smiled. He smiled back. Samuel started highlighting employees who'd gone unnoticed for years. One day, in front of the whole team, he handed a framed certificate to Henry the concierge. He once humiliated. For your grace, your integrity, and your service that has inspired generations. Henry's hands trembled as he accepted it. I never thought I'd see this day, he whispered. Chloe returned. Not as a cashier, but as manager of guest experience. She kept it simple. Packed her own lunch, left her office door open. She led workshops on empathy, ethics, and courage. In the workplace, the younger staff looked up to her. The veterans respected her. Even the doubters began to listen. She never used her relationship with Samuel for leverage. She didn't need to. She had earned every bit of it. One overcast afternoon, Chloe came home to find her mother quiet at the kitchen table, eyes red. "What's wrong?" she asked gently. "The bakery lost power," her mom sighed. "They canceled the cake. I know it's silly. It's just no one really celebrates my birthday anymore." Chloe hugged her. "It's not silly. You deserve to be celebrated." That evening, just after sunset, someone knocked at their door. Chloe opened it. Samuel stood there, not in a suit, but jeans and a wool coat. Behind him, a jazz trio. A bellhop holding a beautiful cake. Samuel stepped inside, holding sunflowers. "For you, Miss Hart," he said softly. "From your daughter and from me." Mother stood frozen, eyes wide. "I didn't think anyone would remember," she whispered. "I didn't think anyone cared." Samuel smiled gently. "Your daughter reminded me that we should always celebrate the people who help shape who we are." They lit candles. They sang. Her mother laughed, a light, joyful sound Chloe hadn't heard in years. For a little while, their small apartment became the warmest place in the world. Later that night, on the balcony, Chloe stood beside Samuel, city lights glowing below. "Really changed everything," she said. Samuel looked at her. "I didn't do it alone." She took his hand. "You didn't just change a company, Samuel. You changed me." He met her eyes and nodded. "You helped me remember who I was. Meant to be." They stood in peaceful silence. The next morning, hand in hand, they walked through the Crestwood lobby, the place where everything had begun. But now it echoed with laughter, light, and the scent of fresh flowers. Staff smiled. Samuel smiled. Back open, genuine. As they passed the front desk where it all started, Chloe leaned in with a smirk. "Still think you hired the wrong person?" Samuel chuckled, squeezing her hand. "No," he said softly. "You were right all along." Because sometimes the most powerful change doesn't start with a big speech. It begins with one voice brave enough to speak up. Chloe stood for what was right, not knowing her courage would soften the heart of the man everyone feared. And in doing so, she didn't just change a company. She helped someone remember how to be human again. If this story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you of the quiet power of truth and kindness, then you're exactly where you're meant to be. Subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories for more tales of love, courage, redemption, and resilience. Because sometimes all it takes is one story to change the way we see the world or ourselves. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next one.